I remember it distinctly, about, 2 o'clock in the morning, and it was like a loud bang, like there'd been a crash outside the house. The house shook. It was almost like, it wasn't a thud, it was a crack. It certainly woke us up. And we were not surprised to read in the local paper the following day that there'd been an earthquake. And the earthquake, as far as I'm aware, occurred in the same week that they started to frack for shale gas about 1.5 miles away at the Prees Hall site.
A lot of it has been that people are going there and they're scaring people into thinking that things are going to happen, and that taps are going to catch on fire, or the house is going to shake for earthquakes. I mean, earthquakes. I mean, that is obsession about the imperceptible. It is ridiculous.
But is it ridiculous?
No, it is totally ridiculous. It's insane.
Exploration digging for shale gas deep in the rocks of Lancashire has been suspended after 2 earthquakes in 2 months. Just a week ago, this kind of gas extraction was given a clean bill of health by MPs.
The British public woke up a year ago, we're now 2012, so it's 2011, to earthquakes. Earthquakes in Blackpool.
I want us to be the greenest government ever. A very simple ambition, and one that I'm absolutely committed to achieving.
It's about the folding stuff. It's about money, and it's about huge amounts of money.
This is the best news for the economy and the environment that we're likely to see in our lifetime.
This isn't just a local problem, it's a national problem, it's a world problem. And quite honestly, you can only drill holes in a piece of cheese so many times before the whole thing collapses. Serious problem, don't do it.
Let me tell you, I've spoken to officers, and I am not having that in my county. I am not having it.
Energy is always high on the political agenda, with successive technologies continuously promising to transform our lives. The UK's dependence on international imports means we are not currently a powerful player in the energy game.
The UK's gas is traditionally sourced from offshore gas fields like this one beneath me in the Irish Sea. Here and in the North Sea, these offshore gas resources are running out, and fast. It is these offshore gas resources that are being replaced by unconventional shale gas. Beneath me is the Bowling Shale on the shores of Lancashire, and I'm standing on what is an estimated 2 trillion cubic metres of shale rock.
The discovery of this resource could spell an economic surge for the ageing seaside town of Blackpool, and 4 miles from Blackpool's iconic tower is the village of Singleton.
Here in the sleepy village of Singleton in Lancashire, on 2 occasions in 2011, residents were woken up in the middle of the night by earth tremors. The cause of these earth tremors? Hydraulic fracturing, also known as fracking.
Fracking is the process of extracting gas from shale rock deep underground. This involves drilling wells up to 2.5 kilometres beneath the Earth's surface. The wells then turn horizontally along the rock strata for up to 3 kilometres. Using millions of gallons of water, sand and a cocktail of chemicals, high-pressured explosive charges force the rock apart, releasing the gas. The natural gas, water and chemicals are pumped back to the surface so the gas can be extracted. But not all of this liquid reaches the surface, which can potentially contaminate groundwater.
Hi, my name is Mark Miller. I'm the CEO of Quadrilla Resources.
Quadrilla Resources are the first company to drill for shale gas in the UK and claim that shale gas is a lower carbon alternative to coal. Quadrilla is one of 4 companies with a permit to search for gas in the UK. Professor Alan Riley is an advisor to the government on energy law. So Alan, why does the UK need shale gas?
I think there are three reasons really. I mean, the first is that it provides energy security. We have our own gas resources, and if there are problems either with gas coming from Russia or LNG coming through the Straits of Hormuz, it's great. Secondly, is CO2 emissions. You can replace high CO2 emission coal with gas, 50% less CO2 emitting. And the third is the potential for economic growth. Low gas prices, rebuilding British manufacturing industry.
Local councillor Maxine Chu is aware of the potential benefits of fracking, but also appreciates the concerns of her fellow residents at the secrecy with which the exploratory drilling began.
Suddenly, there appeared in a field in Singleton a huge drilling rig that everybody was instantly up in arms against and wanted to know what the dickens was happening.
Drilling was suspended after the earth tremors, pending an investigation. But even so, the residents of Singleton are not immune to disruption. These trucks are part of Quadrilla's ongoing geophysical survey, a requirement before drilling can resume.
If you are totally opposed to it, and the government are going to be determined to extract shale gas, and Farnborough Council vigorously object and do everything they can to stop it, Farnborough Council will be just taken out of the equation.
Is Maxine's approach the only route into the heart of what is going on at these eerie fracking sites in Lancashire? Graham Bentley expressed his frustration at what he views as Quadrilla's disregard for local residents.
It was the low amount of public consultation which, obviously raises your suspicions that something's going on that they're not telling you about, and there must be a reason why they're not telling you. Because if it was a good thing that was great for the community, why wouldn't they shout it from the rooftop? There were 2 A4 notices on telegraph poles. One of them was actually down this track, which is actually a private track, and nobody comes down this track. So we feel that was deliberately placed. They're ticking the box basically. There's been public consultation. Okay, there was 2 notices on telegraph poles. There's a road about half a mile away. That road was recently upgraded, even though it's been a really bad road actually for quite a long time. All of a sudden it's been widened and resurfaced. So we think that's a little bit suspicious that, the council are now starting to sort of do a few repair jobs. Alarm bells are ringing already. In the media, they will talk about how much gas is in place and how long it's going to last and how many jobs it's going to provide. Now, to do that, they would really have to scale this up big time. But then when we ask them about their scaling up operations, you don't get that information. These are things that we haven't got the answers to, because you're not given those answers. The alarm bells are ringing even louder now.
Quadrilla refused to be interviewed, but assured us that they are confident that they have a strong record on engagement and public information. Back in Singleton, resident John Ashcroft's opposition to fracking is born from the close proximity of the fracking site to his back garden.
They think this is just going to be all hunky-dory and it's going to create thousands of jobs for people around here. Doing what? Cutting the grass? Those are the only jobs the people around here are going to get. This is a lovely place, and that's the reason I moved here. I do think, and I've got to pick my words quite carefully, it's about the folding stuff. It's about money, and it's about huge amounts of money. I don't think Quadrilla have considered the view of the local residents at all. I do think that there's a lack of transparency in this. And I think this investigation about the earthquakes, which we felt, by the way, is a bit of a smokescreen.
12 months after the earthquakes, DEC released a report detailing the conclusions of their investigation. It said, the observed seismic activity was induced by the hydraulic fracture treatments at Priest Hall, and that it is not possible to state categorically that no further earthquakes will be experienced during a similar treatment in a nearby well. Ultimately, the authors of the report concluded that, shale gas exploration activities could continue with caution.
We all knew, I think, that after an inquiry that the government would take a pace back and say, on balance, the effects geologically and environmentally are outweighed by the strategic and the financial considerations of gas. We all knew that would be the case. So why have we got this here?
But it's not just Singleton, and it's not just earthquakes that are a concern. In fact, earth tremors are only a tiny part of a bigger problem. The UK has large shale gas reserves in an area that runs along the Pennines, from Lancashire to Humberside. But there's also further deposits in Kent, in Hampshire, South Wales, Central Scotland, Northern Ireland, and here in Sussex. Where we are in Balcombe, the surrounding area is made up of a network of reservoirs that supply the local residents with precious water. And one thing fracking requires is water, and lots of it. The southeast is currently experiencing the worst drought since 1976, and here at Ardingly Reservoir, water levels are only 2/5 of what they should be. So the real question is, can Sussex afford to supply this process with their water?
We're still in drought at the moment. Parts of the country have lifted the ban. Down here in the southeast we're still short of water.
Rosalind, are you concerned about the water usage?
Oh God, yes, we're in severe drought here. I mean, the river here is highly stressed.
Across the border in East Sussex, Councillor Rosalind St-Pierre passed a motion requiring gas licence requests to be put before the full council. The motion was the first of its kind and was passed unanimously, receiving cross-party support and highlighting the cohesion of the community in East Sussex.
Well, I think people in East Sussex are very aware of the local environment. We live in a very fragile environment of a highly populated area. The population here is huge. And we have river systems here, including the River Ouse behind me here, which supplies drinking water to 72,000 dwellings in the area. Now, if that gets in any way damaged, it is huge impact. And people are very locally committed. We have the High Weald, of which licence has already been sold, and we have the South Downs and the South Downs National Park. Again, a very fragile system. If there were to be seismic activity on the South Downs, they're very fragile. Not only would the water be contaminated, the cliffs could possibly collapse as well. It's very serious. If we had fracking here, or in this area, we would have to import the water. When the water is put into the fracks, that is highly contaminated water. I understand from Blackpool that they haven't been able to extract it. We don't have the water treatment plants here. You know, we're looking at an industrial process that we have no infrastructure for. We don't have the roads for it. In the whole of this county, we only have 10 kilometres of dual carriageway roads. So, you know, we are not into that, I'm afraid. We are threatened. We have the site at Balcombe in West Sussex, which is seriously threatening our river, our headwaters of our river, and that. We also have a site in Kent at Cowden. Now, I worked out the other day that those horizontal fracks could go into East Sussex. And let me tell you, I've spoken to officers and I am not having that in my county. I am not having it. They're not coming in underground from a site in Kent. And I have asked officers to rigorously monitor the geological surveys there, because I'm not having them around the edges of the county and sneaking in underground. No way.
Both in Sussex and in Lancashire, there is a growing concern regarding the lack of transparency about what decisions are being made in Westminster.
Lord Brown, if we boil this down first of all from the point of view of the person thinking about going to university,
Do your proposals mean that the average student will have to find more from their own pocket to pay for their education?
Well, the average graduate will. The student won't have to find anything.
Recently, Francis Maud appointed Lord Brown as the lead non-executive director for the Cabinet Office. Now, you may better know Lord Brown as the author of the report that hiked up student fees, but what you may not know is that Lord Brown is a very vocal campaigner for fracking here in the UK. Now, surprisingly, Lord Brown wasn't keen to speak to me about his support for fracking, but perhaps this seems less surprising when you learn that he is on the board of directors for Cuadrilla. But not only that, he actually owns a 30% stake in the company. Furthermore, DEC's recent report, which allows fracking to, in principle, resume, seems less independent when you learn that 4 employees of DEC, in fact, owe their jobs to Lord Brown. So the question is here, should someone that has commercial interests in the industry and close political links really have an input into the government agency that oversees fracking?
Whilst we're being deceived at the top, Cuadrilla are also finding loopholes on the ground. Is this because of a fundamental lack of regulation at government level? Campaigner John Bailey explained one of these loopholes.
We're looking at a typical shale gas drilling or fracking site, or pad as they're generally known, and they occupy an area of just under 1 hectare, and the reason for that is to enable them to well, they don't need to comply with the terms of an environmental impact assessment, and that gives the operator the opportunity to install one of these pads just by talking potentially to a landowner or whatever. They do have the approval of the county council, I believe.
Environmental impact assessments are carried out by the Environment Agency, which is overseen by DEFRA. Now, part of the environmental impact assessment is finding out what chemicals are used in fracking fluid. A Freedom of Information request informed me that there is no standardised list of chemicals used. Rather, the chemicals used varies from site to site. But if an environmental impact assessment is not required for every fracking site, as I've been informed, then where is the Environment Agency's fundamental checking of what chemicals are pumped underground?
So, how do the government regulate fracking in the UK? Firstly, the Department of Energy and Climate Change grants licences to gas companies. Then, the HSC and Environment Agency conduct separate risk assessments. And finally, the gas companies must lobby local councils for planning permission. It's at each of these stages that the rules are continuously allowed to fall by the wayside. Engineer Mike Hill believes that the current system in place is haphazard at best.
But you see, there's a number of government departments, because you have the DEC themselves, but you have DEFRA, who the EA report to, and then you have the Department of Work and Pensions, who the HSE report to. So you've actually got 3 different government departments as well as the various agencies beneath them. So I do feel there needs to be someone taking an overview, or a body taking an overview, that then would ensure nothing's missed.
This stance is supported by Shadow Energy Minister Tom Greatrix.
The regulatory activity that exists is split between lots of different agencies, and my real concern is that it's not properly coordinated, and I think that's something the government could do by addressing the conditions and then ensuring that one of those agencies has the lead on this area, so there isn't any danger of there being duplication of activity. And what often happens when you've got duplication, other things get missed as well. I've been very clear and made clear to the government there are a whole number of issues that properly need to be addressed before drilling can recommence, and I've written to Charles Hendry, who's the Minister responsible for this, following the report last week, saying there are other issues you need to address, and there are issues which aren't covered in that report. Now, the report had a pretty limited and specific remit. That doesn't mean that there aren't other issues that properly need to be addressed before I think there should be any decision to resume activity.
We also tried to talk to Energy Minister Charles Hendry. He refused an interview, but we were provided with this statement. There is nothing unusual about gas activities being subjected to regulation by different bodies. These bodies liaise systematically to ensure there are no gaps. On paper, the HSC also plays a vital role in the regulatory process.
They haven't been down once in 2 years, the HSE, to look at our wells in terms of well integrity. They did come down once to look at the health and safety of the workers, which is fine. I used to be one of those workers, that's very important, but not to look at well integrity at all. It's purely a paperwork exercise, box ticking, and I think that has to change. And it might have worked offshore, which is what they say to me, but I think onshore we need some new specific onshore regs, and they need properly implementing and verifying. I think self-regulation is not going to work.
The HSE were unable to give us an interview, but they essentially confirmed that they are happy to let private companies self-regulate. The HSE requires any company involved in onshore drilling to properly assess and manage any health and safety risks associated with their activity. So the shambolic regulatory process needs reform. But right across the board, the government are actually looking to cut regulation in favour of growth.
One of the key aims of this coalition is to massively reduce the number of rules, laws and regulations that frankly treat all of you like idiots.
I think one of the most crucial factors, and Tony Grayling of the Environment Agency said this just a few weeks ago on a conference I was at, is public opinion. Public opinion could be the most crucial factor in this industry continuing or not. Not science, not engineering reasons, not valid, what I would say valid engineering and science reasons, but purely public opinion because it's so important. And I think that basically the government needs to bring in some new onshore regulations, but that in itself is not enough, because I was shown an example of the regulations that already exist, and there are a lot, but they're all self-regulatory. They're not being verified. They're not being tested, checked independently. The industry checks itself. That can't happen. I mean, here, for example, in Lancashire, in the pedal that Cuadrilla have, come next August, by law, they have to give up 50% of it. So consequently, the other 50% then gets open for bidding again, and we could get other companies coming in, maybe not quite as competent as Cuadrilla, not quite prepared to spend as much money as Cuadrilla are on safety issues and on safety factors.
There is a lack of regard for who is extracting this gas and how they are extracting it. But do our current energy needs outweigh the concerns voiced so far about fracking? Pro-fracking campaigner Nick Greeley believes it does. What's the situation now before fracking? Do we need it?
Well, I think we need it because we need natural gas. Natural gas provides 40% of the generation here in the UK. It's very nice to think of solar and wind, but they're just not ready for prime time. So the alternatives would be the old ones of natural gas, coal or nuclear. Coal is incredibly dirty and dangerous and actually kills several thousand people a year indirectly from the health benefits. Nuclear, I'm not against nuclear, but many people are. Natural gas provides the best alternative. It's not perfect, but it's not perfectly evil either. If we get it from underneath in Blackpool, that will be taxed at UK rates. Instead of exporting money by importing energy, we will use our own gas and get at least 60% of the cost back in UK taxes.
But what about when we went up to Blackpool? We have spoken to residents there and we witnessed this sleepy village have these huge trucks running through. Like, their lives have been completely disrupted and changed, and they were saying their house prices have fallen because of the media hype around it and the concerns. They're not going to reap any benefits.
Well, I think that is maybe a case for the government to consider. But again, any kind of problems that are going to be at the local level, they can be mitigated. And the important thing to consider is that it doesn't last for very long. We can look at areas like California and New Zealand, places far more seismically active than Blackpool. And if they don't have any problem with fracking in those places, why on earth are we letting a few nervous Nellies hijack the debate?
But is fracking a risk worth taking? As things stand, Labour peer Lord Berkeley doesn't think so.
It's very unwise for the government to allow it to go ahead if that's what they're going to do.
And clearly there's a lot more work to be done. I think it needs to be done by somebody who's independent, or probably a group of a committee or something, to get the scientific evidence that we can all trust, and then the politicians can make their decision. The sad thing is that the main target for carbon reduction is 50 years, so 2050, which is 40 years' time. Everybody and most people in the House of Commons and the House of Lords will either be dead or retired by then. And they just shrug their shoulders and say, well, it's for the next election or next to Parliament, which is very sad. I think Cameron is certainly not being the greenest government ever, but I think it's more seat of the pants at the moment. Let's do what we feel like and hope we can get away with it.
And our broadly Eurosceptic government is also failing to live up to European environmental standards.
The Supreme Court is the most powerful court in the land, but EU law is even more powerful. And in 2005, the UK government ratified the Aarhus Convention, which states for any new procedures that impact on the environment, the public must be consulted. By failing to consult the public about the environmental impact of fracking, the UK government is in breach of the Aarhus Convention.
This whole story about shale gas, the only way I can explain it is like a recovering alcoholic. He's in his flat and he's struggling to beat the addiction because he knows that it's killing him. And then he opens a cupboard he forgot about and he finds dozens of bottles of whiskey. Well, he's doomed, he's finished. And I think that's exactly the situation we are in today. We know collectively that we have to go beyond fossil fuels. And just at the time when, well, at least there was a discussion internationally and people tried to get together to find a solution, just at that time, bingo, we find amazing reserves of natural gas we didn't know existed, or we knew existed but we were not sure we could access them. Suddenly they're accessible, so we're doomed in a sense, because all the political will to actually tackle the climate change issue is going to go up in flames. It's just too easy.
There's been a kind of almost a temptation to fall in line with this idea that if this can be done really safely, that it's acceptable, and in actual fact we've decided that it's actually not acceptable.
I mean, I think increasingly there is a feeling that this whole thing is a done deal with the government and their energy policy.
We say we need more energy all the time, but where's the government campaign to use less?
We have been living with a sense of immunity, as though it doesn't really matter as long as we can get in a car and go somewhere. Well, perhaps we have to think again about our reliance, our dependence on these sources of energy, and also our sources of transport. We ourselves have to set the example.
If fracking is to be stopped, it's the voices of the public that need to be heard.
No more fracking! No more fracking! No more fracking! Ban fracking now! Ban fracking now!